This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow Cook Eat Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and our head gardener at Pertshaw, Josie Lewis, who is really often on with me. And she tends to do all the gardening question and answers with me, but also the gardening jobs. And that's what we're doing this week. So we're doing December in the garden. And I'm going to hand over to Josie, which is something that we get asked a lot about, but we are still doing as a major job in the garden in early December, which is it too late to plant tulip bulbs? So over to Josie, whose back is hurting right now, about what bulbs you can still plant in December.
Yes, that well-used bulb planter. I wouldn't be without it. Yeah, and the table that all these artral bulbs are sitting on, I can just begin to see the table appearing. So there is hope. We'll get it done before Christmas. So, no, it's not too late. Keep planting your bulbs. And, always there'll be a pack you've forgotten, a pack you've put in a special place in the garage or in your shed, wherever. Find them all now. And if you can get them in before Christmas, do so. Just not when the ground is frozen or, really waterlogged. We've had a lot of rain in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
So, it hopefully will dry out a little bit. But get the bulbs in the ground. And, even if you have to go into early January or if you're off over Christmas, plant them still. They won't last until next year. So you're not losing anything by planting them whenever you find them. So, yes, do get on with it.
Very, very good. And I'm going to stick with bulbs for the next job, which is about forcing bulbs. And I think it's really worth starting to bring some in if you've got a greenhouse or a sunny porch or even a cool room in your house and a north-facing window. So bring some bulbs in. So if you planted your hyacinths in September for forcing, they could come in now and you'll get them in flower, hopefully for Christmas, but certainly for sort of mid-January. And if you want something for Christmas, bring paper whites in. So Josie really can't bear the smell of paper whites like lots of people. But I love them. And so I'm going to bring them in. And we've got a very sunny kitchen here. But, we do have a wood burner, but it remains relatively cool, this room. And that's the only thing is you don't want to bring it into a super heated room or put it really near, or them rather really near a radiator, because that heat will make them pump out the growth spurt almost too quickly. And they get a little bit too sort of wimpy and weedy and will fall over. I never know whether this is just an urban myth or whatever, but some people tell you to water your forced bulbs with 1/10 vodka to water. And apparently that's meant to stunt them so you don't then need to stake them. But I mean, we must do a trial, Josie, mustn't we, of paper whites fed vodka or not?
Fed with vodka, excellent.
Yeah. Or rather watered with vodka. But anyway, and then of course, as you bring them inside, if you haven't already made them a little bit of a nest of support, vodka or no vodka, it's really nice to have silver birch or, twiggy nests of the oak leaves are still on the trees here, funnily enough, and looking really beautiful autumn colouring as we go into winter. And so making a little nest of those to support them. So that would be my next thing. If I want some bulbs for Christmas and in the new year, bring them inside into the warmth. So over to you for the next job, Josie.
Yes, well, alongside bulb planting, we are pruning, so doing winter pruning. That goes on into January and February as well. So if anybody's looking to get their secateurs out, you can be pruning roses now. We're obviously pruning the roses to put on top of the pots of bulbs anyway. But this is just an ongoing thing. We'll get through our roses through December and January. Anything like wisteria you can prune from now on. Once the sap is not rising anymore and the leaves have all fallen off, then you know that you can get on with pruning, so wisteria and grapevines. If you've got fruit trees, you can reshape your apples and pear trees now. The other thing I would do is take, I think we've spoken about this before, taking the tops off the really top heavy things like buddleia so they don't get knocked about in the wind. Only the top third, and the same with salvias. I noticed some of the salvias this week after we had a little bit of snow last week, and the snow sort of fell and stuck to the plants, and so it split the salvias apart. So you just need to take the top growth off the salvias and cut out any broken branches that you see. You need to leave as much top growth on the salvias as possible to protect the base rather. But it was interesting in the stone trough that I was talking about earlier, the Sparmania, the tops had been completely blackened by the frost, but that had protected the growth underneath, that still looked nice and green and fine. Yeah. So it's a really good example of how the top growth does protect lower down.
They almost become mulches of themselves, don't they? The top growth.
Yes, exactly that. Yes, yeah.
Great. So just the final thing that we wanted to mention for December is, of course, about biodiversity. And it's about feeding the birds. And, oh gosh, there's so much debate about this at the moment. Should you use bird feeders or not? Should you feed birds or not? So bird feeders are just lovely because it's so nice to have that extra dimension in your garden. But remember that feast and famine is more natural. So actually feeding them for a bit and then stopping is, you think it's unkind, but actually it's much more natural, and they will then go and find other sources of food, which is exactly what they would have to do in the wild. Why do that? Because if you just keep feeding, unfortunately what you're doing is you're supporting the families, the genus of birds that really thrive in that situation. So for instance, great tits and blue tits and goldfinches have really, really thrived since we started using so many bird feeders in the last 20 years. And that has knocked out of the ecosystem such big populations of things like coal tits, marsh tits and long-tailed tits, because they're less adapted to feed on a bird feeder. So it's just worth bearing that in mind, that feast and famine is quite a good thing. And then the other thing is really important is you must wash properly, with some fairy liquid and a washing up brush. So keep it specially, just like you would for your hens. If you've got hens, you've got to wash the drinkers with them, but with the feeders at least once a week. And otherwise you get a cross transfer of both parasites and bacterial infection. And that's what caused such a terrible decline in our greenfinch population 20 years ago, which is only just beginning to recover. So it's really important to feed birds, but perhaps the best way of all is to walk around your garden, go to the local park, walk around friends' gardens and see the things that still have berries on in December. And I've just noticed that we have 2 crab apples here. One called Malus hupahensis, which we adore, is completely stripped bare, whereas Malus Dartmouth is still covered in fruit, and so with it, blackbirds. And, it's really held on to its roots so well. So make a note of the plants and the trees and the shrubs that still have berries and think of planting them for next winter, because they really will help sustain a really good, healthy and a good wide population of birds. So that's December and the things that we are really prioritizing before we shut down for 2 weeks or so as we go into Christmas and New Year. So I hope those were useful, and thanks so much for listening. And yes, we'll see you with lots more ideas, tips and hacks, as they're now called, the modern word, in the new year 2025. Thanks so much for listening, and thank you, Josie.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, I'd really love it if you reviewed, rated and subscribed on wherever you listen to your podcasts. It'll help new listeners to know that we're here and enable us to keep getting the very best and most interesting guests week after week.